While walking his dog along the riverbank, Mike noticed a shadowy figure in the distance, standing eerily still by the water's edge. As he drew closer, curious yet cautious, the dim light of dusk made the figure's details clearer. His initial curiosity turned to sheer terror as he recognized what it was. It wasn't just someone loitering by the river. It was something unimaginable, making him turn pale. As Mike continued his approach, every step felt heavier. His dog, Max, tugged at the leash, sensing his owner's unease. The dim light of dusk slowly unveiled the figure's sinister features. The silhouette seemed almost human, but was distorted in ways that defied nature. The closer Mike got, the clearer it became that this was no ordinary person out for an evening stroll. He couldn't tear his eyes away from the unnerving sight. Mike's initial curiosity had now solidified into sheer terror. There, illuminated by the soft glow of the setting sun, stood what looked like a man, yet not quite. The figure's skin was pale, almost translucent, and its eyes glowed with an eerie light. Mike could feel his legs shaking, and the terror made his mouth go dry. He no longer cared for the mystery. All he wanted was to get away. Realizing that this wasn't merely someone loitering, Mike felt a wave of nausea. The figure, though humanoid, was grotesque in every sense, with elongated limbs and a grin that seemed almost stitched onto its face. He had seen enough horror movies to know that standing there was a terrible idea. The surreal scene in front of him made his blood run cold, making him turn pale with fear. Mike stood rooted in place, almost unable to breathe. His heart pounded wildly, echoing in his ears. The horrifying realization of what stood before him made him feel as though time had stopped. Every fiber of his being screamed at him to run, but his legs refused to move. Max continued to bark ferociously, but the sound seemed distant, drowned out by the overwhelming fear that consumed him. With his body completely paralyzed, Mike could only watch as his dog, Max, barked loudly at the shadowy figure by the river. Max's barks echoed across the water, but it didn't seem to deter the eerie presence in the slightest. Instead, the figure turned its glowing eyes directly towards them, sending a chilling shockwave through Mike's entire body. The dog's aggressive stance gave him a brief moment of clarity. Overcoming the initial shock, Mike felt the urgency to act. Quickly retreating, he tugged on Max's leash and turned back the way he had come. His footsteps were hurried, and he could feel his heart pounding in his chest like a drum. He grabbed his phone with shaky hands, deciding to call the police for help. The seriousness of what he had seen propelled him into action, overriding his fear. With his heart racing, Mike made the call. Desperation and fear laced his voice as he tried to describe the shadowy figure without sounding hysterical. The dispatcher on the other end asked him to stay calm, but the image of the figure was imprinted in Mike's mind. He could barely keep his voice steady. Every second felt like an eternity as he recounted the terrifying scene by the river. The authorities assured Mike that they would send someone to investigate immediately. But even after ending the call, he couldn't shake off the feeling of unease. The memory of those glowing eyes and elongated limbs was seared into his mind. He continued to look back nervously, half expecting the figure to be following him. Something deep inside told him that life wouldn't be the same after tonight. All that night, Mike couldn't find any semblance of sleep. The image of the shadowy figure haunted his thoughts, playing over and over in his mind. Every slight noise outside made him jump, and he kept checking his windows and doors for any sign of danger. His mind was a whirlwind of fear and confusion, constantly replaying the horrifying scene by the river. The dawn couldn't come soon enough. Determined to make sense of the unsettling encounter, Mike decided to talk to his neighbors the next day. After a mostly sleepless night, he went door to door, asking if anyone else had noticed something unusual near the river. Most shrugged it off, but his curiosity wouldn't let him drop the matter. Maybe someone had seen something, anything, that could help explain what he'd witnessed. His elderly neighbor, Mrs. Jenkins, shared something that caught his attention. She mentioned seeing strange lights near the river recently, but quickly dismissed them as teenagers playing pranks. Her words provided a small measure of comfort, but also added another layer of mystery. What kind of lights could be mistaken for teenagers' pranks? Mike thanked her and continued his inquiries, hoping to piece things together. Despite Mrs. Jenkins' reassurance, Mike's feelings of dread only deepened. The idea of strange lights combined with his own terrifying experience made his skin crawl. Each conversation with a neighbor left him more unsettled, adding to his growing sense of urgency. He couldn't shake off the fear that something far more sinister was at play. Determined, he vowed to get to the bottom of it. Determined to find answers, Mike decided to return to the river in broad daylight the next day. He believed the clarity of daylight might reveal something he had missed in the darkness. With Max by his side, he retraced his steps, his eyes scanning every inch of the riverbank. The familiar setting looked different in the light, less menacing, but no less important. While carefully examining the riverbank, Mike noticed a series of footprints leading away from the water and into the forest. Intrigued, he decided to follow the trail. He couldn't help but feel a mix of fear and determination as he ventured into the woods. The footprints were a fresh clue, and he hoped they might lead him to some answers about the eerie figure. Following the trail deeper into the forest, Mike stumbled upon an old, abandoned campsite. The site looked as though someone had left in a hurry, with scattered belongings and remnants of a campfire. The discovery made his pulse quicken. It was clear someone had been here recently. The eerie feeling from the river returned, urging him to dig deeper into the mystery. Among the litter at the campsite, something caught Mike's eye, a tattered old photograph. Picking it up, he saw it was a picture of a family. The image felt out of place in the deserted, eerie setting. Instinctively, Mike decided to pocket the photograph. It might be a crucial piece of the puzzle, a link to whoever had been at the campsite. Determined to identify the people in the photograph, Mike showed it to a friend who worked in local archives. His friend, intrigued by the mystery, promised to help uncover the identities of the family. The photo had an aura of age and significance. Mike felt a mixture of hope and anxiety as he handed it over, knowing it might be a key to understanding the strange occurrences. After some research, Mike and his friend discovered that the photograph depicted the Henderson family, who had mysteriously gone missing 20 years ago. The revelation was both chilling and enlightening. The connection between the eerie figure, the abandoned campsite, and the missing family added layers to the mystery. Mike felt a newfound determination to uncover the truth behind their disappearance. Spurred by the discovery, Mike decided to dig deeper into the local history surrounding the Henderson family. Visits to the local library and hours spent poring over old newspapers and records became his new routine. Each piece of information he unearthed painted a more complex picture. Mike felt himself drawn into a web of secrets, determined to untangle the truth no matter where it led. As Mike dug deeper into the local lore, he discovered that the river had always been the epicenter of numerous strange disappearances and other unexplained events. Newspaper clippings, old diaries, and local legends all told tales of people vanishing without a trace. The more he read, the more he realized that his eerie encounter with the shadowy figure was just the latest in a string of bizarre occurrences. Mike's relentless investigation began to draw the attention of others. A local journalist named Sarah approached him, intrigued by his findings. She had always been fascinated by local mysteries and saw in Mike's quest an opportunity to uncover the truth. Sarah offered to help him in his investigation, bringing her skills as a journalist and a fresh perspective to their search for answers. Together, Mike and Sarah started to piece together various accounts and local lore related to the river. They uncovered more connections to the Henderson case, including testimonies from neighbors who had heard strange noises and seen unusual lights near the river around the time of the family's disappearance. Every new piece of information further deepened the mystery that surrounded the dark waters. During one of their sessions, Sarah suggested they track down the lone survivor of the Henderson family tragedy. Amy Henderson had managed to escape the fate that befell her family, but she had since become a recluse, living in a nearby town. Convincing her to talk might be challenging, but Sarah believed Amy could provide invaluable insights into what really happened. Reluctantly, Amy Henderson agreed to meet with Mike and Sarah. In her quiet, dimly lit home, she shared her harrowing experience. With a haunted look in her eyes, Amy revealed she too had seen the shadowy figure by the river right before her family went missing. The figure had been watching them, just like it was watching Mike that fateful evening. Her story sent chills down their spines. Amy's recount of her family's disappearance was filled with cryptic warnings and an atmosphere of palpable fear. She spoke in broken, hesitant sentences, clearly traumatized by her experience. She hinted at something more sinister, something beyond human understanding that was tied to the river. Mike and Sarah could sense that there was much Amy wasn't telling them, perhaps because she feared repercussions even now. Amy's voice trembled as she insisted that whatever she and Mike had seen was not human. She pleaded with them to steer clear of the river, describing it as a place tainted by an ancient, malevolent force. Her hands shook as she spoke, and her eyes darted nervously around the room, as if expecting the shadowy figure to appear at any moment. Her desperation was evident. Despite Amy's desperate warnings, Mike felt an overwhelming compulsion to continue his search for answers. Sarah understood his determination, but couldn't help feeling apprehensive. They both knew the risks, but the drive to uncover the truth about the shadowy figure and the river's dark history was too strong. They agreed to move forward cautiously, determined to solve the mystery that had plagued the town for so long. One night, as Mike was sifting through some old documents, his phone buzzed with a new message. To his dismay, it was an anonymous text, filled with threats and a clear warning to stop his investigation immediately. The messages continued through the night, escalating in urgency and menacing tone. Whoever was behind them wanted to scare Mike into abandoning his quest for the truth. Instead of deterring him, the anonymous messages only strengthened Mike's resolve to get to the bottom of the mystery. He shared the threats with Sarah, who was equally unfazed. Together, they decided to push forward, determined now more than ever to uncover whatever dark secrets the river held. The new threats only confirmed that they were on the right track, and backing down was not an option. Mike and Sarah decide to revisit the abandoned campsite, hoping to find more clues. The site had an eerie stillness to it, and the air felt thick with the weight of unanswered questions. They carefully picked their way through the remnants of what seemed to be a hasty retreat. Sarah shivered, not from the cold, but from the unease that clung to the place. They needed to find something, anything that could shed light on the mysterious figure. They find a hidden diary belonging to one of the Henderson children, detailing eerie encounters by the river. The diary was nestled under a pile of old clothes, its cover faded and edges worn. As they flipped through the pages, they found entries that spoke of unsettling experiences. The words were those of a child, innocent yet dripping with fear. The diary held recollections of strange sights and sounds that seemed all too familiar to Mike. The diary entries reveal that the children often spotted the shadowy figure staring at them from the woods. The figure's presence was a recurring theme in the child's writings, described vividly as if etched into their memory. Mike and Sarah exchanged uneasy glances, realizing the significance of these descriptions. The figure wasn't a figment of imagination. It was real and had been haunting the Henderson children long before Mike ever saw it. These sightings started innocently, but grew increasingly menacing over time. Initially, the children wrote off the figure as a peculiar part of nature, a game to spice up their days at the campsite. However, the diary's tone darkened as the sightings became more frequent and disturbing. The figure no longer just watched from a distance. It got closer and closer with each passing day, its eerie presence overshadowing their every move. The last entry abruptly ends, suggesting they planned to confront the figure the night they disappeared. It described a mix of fear and resolve, a desperate attempt to reclaim their sense of safety. The child's final words hinted that the family had decided to face whatever lurked in the shadows. Mike and Sarah felt a chill run down their spines. This entry was dated the very night the Hendersons vanished without a trace. Mike and Sarah now suspect foul play and believe there could be more evidence hidden around the campsite. The diary was a significant find, but it left them with more questions than answers. They scoured the area, turning over rocks and sifting through dirt, searching for anything that could provide further insight. The ominous atmosphere seemed to thicken, as if the very land resisted their intrusion into its secrets. They dig deeper around the campsite and soon unearth a rusted old box containing personal items of the Hendersons. The box was partially buried, its metal corroded from years of exposure. Sarah pried it open, revealing a trove of belongings, photos, trinkets, and letters. Each item painted a picture of the family's life before their disappearance. The discovery felt both intrusive and enlightening, giving them fragments of the past to piece together. Among them, they find a cryptic note addressed to the children from their father, advising them to run if they ever saw the figure again. The note was hastily written, its urgency palpable through the smeared ink and frantic handwriting. It was a chilling directive, urging the children to flee on sight of the figure. This revelation added another layer of terror to the story, suggesting the father knew more about the figure's true nature. The note hints at a dark secret held by the family, possibly linked to the mysterious figure by the river. Mike and Sarah speculated about what the Hendersons might have known and why they had chosen to camp by the river despite the dangers. The urgency in the father's words suggested a history of encounters with something no parent would wish upon their children. The pieces were coming together, but many questions still lingered. Mike and Sarah are determined to decipher the clues and uncover the truth behind the figure. Armed with the diary, the note, and their growing sense of urgency, they vowed not to rest until they had answers. The mystery had consumed their lives, and with each revelation, the stakes seemed to rise. They knew the path ahead was fraught with danger, but turning back wasn't an option. The truth about the figure awaited them. As they piece everything together, Mike realizes the shadowy figure might be a human with a vendetta against the Hendersons. The pattern is too deliberate, the sightings too synchronized to be mere chance. Mike folds the old photograph back into his pocket and shares his theory with Sarah. They both understand that this realization shifts their investigation from following an urban legend to unmasking a very real threat. Confronting Amy one last time, she breaks down and confesses that her father had stolen something valuable from a dangerous person. Her tears are silent, but the weight of her words is heavy. The oppressive atmosphere in her home grows even more stifling as she recounts the story. Mike's mind races as he considers the implications. Everything starts to fit together like a twisted puzzle. The figure by the river is this person or their descendant coming back to finish the revenge. Every sighting, every eerie experience had been a calculated step in a master plan of vengeance spanning decades. Amy's father had unwittingly doomed them all with his theft. Mike feels a chill run through him as he realizes the stakes have escalated, dragging in both past and present. Amy reveals that her father had been obsessed with the stolen heirloom for decades until his death. It had consumed him, warping his perception and ruining his family life. The heirloom, once a symbol of their misbegotten fortune, had become a curse. Mike listens intently as Amy recalls the many nights her father spent poring over the artifact, leaving her with a lifetime of unease. Realizing the gravity of the situation, Mike and Sarah contemplate their next move. They sit in silence, the weight of recent revelations heavy on their minds. The heirloom is more than just an object. It's the key to ending this nightmare. They know they have to find it, but the uncertainty of their next steps make the tension nearly unbearable. Their resolve, however, remains unwavering. They decide to try and track down the heirloom, hoping to use it as leverage. Their plan is fraught with risk, but the potential reward is too great to ignore. They gather their notes, making a list of potential leads and resources. The heirloom's last known locations are analysed meticulously. Mike can't shake off a looming sense of dread, but the urgency of the situation propels them forward. They scoured local records and archives, trying to find any mention of the heirloom and its history. Hours of combing through dusty files and yellowing papers start to yield small pieces of the puzzle. Slowly but surely, they begin to map out significant locations tied to the heirloom. Each scrap of information makes the picture clearer, though the full story still eludes them. Eventually, they find a clue that points them to an old, abandoned mansion on the outskirts of town. It's a place shrouded in local legend, its decaying structure a stark reminder of a bygone era. The mansion's history is steeped in mystery, making it the perfect hiding spot for something as valuable as the heirloom. Mike and Sarah exchange glances, a mix of trepidation and determination in their eyes. Believing the heirloom might be hidden there, Mike and Sarah head to the mansion. They prepare cautiously, bringing flashlights and whatever tools they might need to search through the dilapidated structure. The journey to the outskirts feels long, the road winding and cloaked in a foreboding silence. Every turn brings them closer to their goal, yet also deeper into the unknown. The mansion looks abandoned and uncared for, but they decide to explore it regardless. Its grand exterior is marred by years of neglect, with windows shattered and ivy creeping up the walls. Mike and Sarah step inside, the interior equally derelict and filled with dust. They start their search systematically, each room an eerie echo of the home's former grandeur. Their footsteps echo eerily through the empty halls. Inside, they find old furniture, cobwebbed rooms, and a sense of eerie desolation. The air is thick with the smell of decay and mold, making it hard to breathe. Mike and Sarah move cautiously, their flashlights cutting through the gloom. Each room they enter seems more ominous than the last, filled with relics that tell tales of a bygone era. The silence is almost deafening, adding to the unsettling atmosphere. In one of the rooms, they discover a hidden compartment in a bookshelf. Sarah's keen eyes catch the slight irregularity in the woodwork, prompting her to investigate further. With a gentle tug, the compartment slides open, revealing a small, dust-covered space within. Both of them hold their breath as they peer inside, hopeful yet wary of what they might find. After years of waiting, the compartment finally reveals its secrets. Inside the compartment is a dusty old box, which they carefully open. Its age is evident from the cracked wood and tarnished metal hinges. Mike handles it with utmost care, as if the box might crumble under his touch. The anticipation in the air is palpable as they finally lift the lid. The box's contents are shrouded in an old cloth, still protecting whatever lies within. Their eyes widen with awe and curiosity. To their amazement, the box contains the stolen heirloom, a dazzling piece of jewellery. Its brilliance is undiminished despite the years, shimmering in the dim light of their flashlights. The gem at its centre captures the light in a mesmerising dance, making it clear why someone would go to great lengths to claim it. Mike and Sarah are momentarily speechless, the heirloom's beauty only accentuating the peril they now face. Mike and Sarah realise they need to be careful with their next steps, as the figure might come after them. The heirloom's discovery is a double-edged sword, bringing them closer to the truth but also heightening their exposure to danger. They exchange serious glances, both understanding the stakes without needing words. Their immediate priority shifts to ensuring their safety while figuring out their next move. They decide to go into hiding temporarily, planning their strategy carefully. The need for secrecy is paramount, as any misstep could lead the shadowy figure right to them. Mike and Sarah huddle together, mapping out safe locations and potential allies. They resolve to lay low for a while, gathering their strength and compiling their findings. The tension between them is thick, but it sharpens their focus on the tasks ahead. While laying low, they receive another threatening message, this time more direct and terrifying. The message arrives in the dead of night, its words chilling and precise. Whoever is behind it knows they have the heirloom and is growing impatient. Mike reads the message aloud, his voice steady but laced with worry. Sarah types out a quick reply, determined not to show any sign of fear. The pressure intensifies with each passing moment. Despite the danger, they feel they are close to unraveling the full mystery and decide to press on. Their combined determination fuels them, overshadowing the fear that nips at their heels. Mike and Sarah know the stakes are high, but the possibility of discovering the truth drives them forward. They double-check their preparations, ensuring they have everything needed for the next phase. There is no turning back now. They reach out to a trusted local authority for potential protection and advice. Mike makes the call, explaining their situation in as much detail as he dares. The officer on the other end listens intently, recognizing the urgency in Mike's voice. A meeting is arranged, providing a glimmer of hope. This ally could be the key to their safety, adding another layer of security to their perilous journey. With their help, they devise a plan to confront the shadowy figure safely. The strategy is intricate, designed to minimize risk while maximizing their chances of success. Mike and Sarah feel a renewed sense of purpose, each step of the plan carefully detailed and rehearsed. They arm themselves with the resources provided by their new ally, ready to face the figure head-on. The final showdown looms on the horizon. They set up a meeting at a neutral location, hoping to end the ordeal once and for all. The tension was palpable as they waited for the mysterious figure to appear. Mike and Sarah had chosen an abandoned warehouse, far enough from prying eyes. The dimly lit environment seemed fitting for the confrontation at hand. They both knew this could be their last chance to solve the mystery and reclaim their peace. The shadowy figure arrives, revealing himself as the son of the man who swore vengeance on the Henderson family. He stepped out from the shadows, his eyes filled with a mix of anger and determination. His presence was imposing, radiating the intensity of his inherited grudge. Mike and Sarah couldn't hide their shock as they realized the true depth of the vendetta they were up against. The air crackled with tension. He demands the heirloom and threatens to eliminate anyone who knows the secret. His voice was cold, each word dripping with menace. The gravity of his threats was not lost on Mike and Sarah, who clutched the heirloom tightly. They felt the weight of the situation pressing down on them, knowing that any wrong move could result in dire consequences. The figure's unwavering gaze left no room for doubt. Mike and Sarah, clutching the heirloom, tried to negotiate calmly, knowing their lives depend on it. Sarah took a deep breath, her voice steady as she laid out their terms. Mike nodded in agreement, adding his own insights. They knew they had to play this carefully, each word measured and deliberate. The atmosphere was thick with suspense, each second a test of their resolve and composure. Their lives hung in the balance. The figure's obsession, inherited from his late father, makes him unpredictable and dangerous. His eyes darted wildly as he recounted the stories passed down to him, each one fueling his desire for revenge. The depth of his fixation was evident, his every move calculated yet erratic. Mike and Sarah watched closely, knowing that his unpredictability was their greatest threat. They couldn't afford to underestimate the lengths he might go to. Sarah cleverly uses their knowledge of the heirloom's history to appeal to the figure's sense of justice. She spoke with authority, weaving a narrative that highlighted the heirloom's rightful place and the injustice of the past. Her words seemed to resonate, striking a chord that ignited a flicker of doubt in the figure's eyes. Mike supported her claims, adding weight to their argument. They hoped this would be enough to sway him. Unexpectedly, the figure hesitates, showing a flicker of doubt and humanity. His hard exterior softened momentarily, revealing the internal conflict that raged within him. It was a brief glimpse of the person he could have been had vengeance not consumed his life. Mike and Sarah seized the moment, pressing further into his doubt. The tension seemed to break, if only for a fleeting second, giving them a glimmer of hope. Finally, they managed to convince him to take the heirloom and leave them in peace. Handing over the precious artifact, Mike and Sarah felt a surge of relief, though it was tinged with caution. The figure's eyes lingered on them, perhaps recognizing the futility of continuing his vendetta. With a last contemplative look, he turned and walked away, the heirloom finally in his possession. Their words had managed to break through. The shadowy figure departs, the treasure in hand, as Mike and Sarah breathe a sigh of relief. They watched his silhouette fade into the distance, each step taking a burden off their shoulders. The ordeal that had threatened to consume them was finally over. Exhaustion washed over them, their bodies sagging with the release of tension. The night felt less menacing now, the air filled with the promise of peace. Exhausted but victorious, they return home, grateful to have survived the harrowing ordeal. The drive back was quiet, both reflecting on the series of events that had led to this moment. Pulling into their driveway, they felt an overwhelming sense of relief. The nightmare was behind them, and the future seemed brighter. They knew they'd carry the memories, but they were ready to move on and rebuild their lives.